Welcome to Mommy Has Questions. Motherhood is hard, but it's even harder when the system is stacked against us. We're four moms who have come together from the big city and the suburbs to call out societal norms that make being a woman feel like a struggle every day, and to spark the change we all need. If you're tired of feeling unsupported and you've got questions, you're not alone. This is your village. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Mommy Has Questions Season 2. My name is Cristina Sansone. I'm a public health professional on pause, currently stay-at-home mom of 3 young kids living in the suburbs of the South. And I've still got a lot of questions about motherhood, the system, the state of the world, you name it. Today, though, I'm joined by 3 incredible women from among other things in New York City. And they're going to help me answer these burning questions. But before we do that, let's reintroduce ourselves. Ladies.
Hi, I'm Jess. I'm an engineer by training and a mom.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I am a corporate real estate executive and also a mom.
Hi, I'm Tiffany, and I'm a multimedia creator and a mom.
All right, ladies. Well, let's get into it today because I was just listening to the Scott Galloway podcast, which is a fantastic podcast. If you haven't listened to it, he's got great conversations with incredible people. And the one that I just listened to was an episode featuring Jonathan Haidt and Richard Reeves. And they were discussing the crisis of men and boys, which I think about all the time, raising 2 young sons in today's modern society. And really, it's talking about how moms like us have raised the alarm, but something needs to be done because boys are being left behind. However, what I want to ask today is how can we figure out what young men need? And by young men, I'm talking about ages like 18 to 34 who are just starting into their adult life, because it's such a pivotal time period where they're just getting into real life per se and really making huge decisions that affect obviously themselves, other people around them, and society as a whole. So I want to figure out what these young men need. So before we dive in, Jamie, you and I both listened to this podcast episode and we were really struck by it. However, I do want to preface, this is all from the perspective of men. We are including our perspective as women. So part of this is talking about how these men have called out these systems that are essentially no longer serving either men or women. And essentially starting off with the fact that for millennia, men and women have worked together. May not have been always productive from one side or the other, but we've worked together in tandem. And right now what we're seeing is such extreme division that we are fighting against one another. Men are blaming women for their problems. Women are blaming men for their problems. But essentially one of the main cruxes is that like men are feeling that female empowerment is the cause of male oppression, which is not the case. And in fact, what they point out is really it's an intergenerational problem that is happening right now. And we are not looking back at the generation that came before us who actually, I mean, for all intents and purposes, pulled up the ladder behind them.
So, Christina, when you say last generation, I'm trying to understand what that looks like in sort of the eras that they were raised, like when they were children.
I mean, so my perception is we're talking about Gen X and above who essentially were able to come into this golden age of, prosperity, essentially, where these institutions were established in order to help them and the world that existed for that time, and didn't take into account a lot of issues that we're having today, which are exacerbated by technology, the echo chamber that is social media, the economic issues that we are having today that did not plague those previous generations. And then again, the fact that the older generations are essentially hoarding a lot of this wealth and not leaving a lot for the younger generations to aspire to. Like that American dream that once existed is so hard to achieve, especially for Gen Z that's coming up. But anyway, Jamie, your take, capitalist take. Let's go.
Well, so I appreciate that, but it comes down to, again, asking like, what do men need? Because I framed this to my husband. We had a very similar conversation I said, okay, but you're saying that you're being left behind. And he also was very clear to be, I'm not being left behind. I have achieved the things. I have a family. I have a good job. I make good money. I don't feel like I'm being left behind, but there's this subset right behind me who's saying that. And so I said to him, well, as the male representative in this conversation that we're having, what do you need to not feel left behind? And what was really interesting to me was that he didn't have an answer. Like he couldn't speak from a place to be like, well, we need support in this area or we need that. And I think part of the crux of this is that it's this pointing out from men that women are blaming men for their problems and men are blaming women for their problems. And here's the thing. I think that men are blaming women and we're being scapegoated because of the successes we've achieved. But I don't think women are blaming men. I think women are blaming the systems that aren't working for us. And we're trying to overcome certain systems in society and structures. And so I think that's where we're kind of talking past each other because I want to recognize that we're here to support you. Like, I want to see you be successful and have what you need because when you're successful, I'm successful. Like, that's also capitalism, right? A rising tide lifts all boats is often what we go to. And so I just want to like point out that piece that they need to dig in a little bit and get clear on what they want and what they need.
Well, so, okay, when you say like women aren't blaming men, they're blaming the system and men are blaming women, implicit in that is men are the system. The system has been built for men.
They created the system. And the system has changed greatly between Generation X and this generation, right?
But I want them to recognize they can step outside of that system.
No, they haven't learned that. Nothing.
They haven't learned. Wait, you just made my point. They haven't learned.
They have to learn that. They have to learn how to work in the new system. You have to learn how to adapt, right?
And let's talk about this new system for a second. When you talk about, this last generation is not sharing their wealth, this is what comes to my mind. The wealth gap is insane. It has between the last generation and this generation, the poor have gotten so much poorer and the wealthy have gotten so much wealthier. And there is literally no middle class. And so we tend to try to find somebody to blame in that. And the people to blame are the people who have cut all of the taxes for the wealthy and have pulled back all of the opportunities for middle class. You can't, like when first of all, I just want to say that I am Generation X and I'm kind of at the end of Generation X, but I am Generation X. My mother raised us as a single mom on $30,000 a year. And we had a decent house in a decent neighborhood. Now we struggled. We didn't have anything extra. There was definitely a lot of times when like the electricity would go off, right? And she couldn't pay that bill for a little while or whatever. But like essentially we had what we needed and we survived and it was fine. And she had to work a couple of jobs to make that $30,000 a year. You can't wipe your butt for $30,000 a year. $30,000 a year is like, and yes, New York City, but I'm talking about Texas. I have family still in Texas, and this generation is living with their parents. They can't even afford to get an apartment. The crappiest apartment in the crappiest neighborhood is not affordable. It's crazy what has happened economically in this country.
I think you pointed out one piece of the puzzle, which is the financial economic piece. And I don't think we need to go too deep in the rabbit hole of how to fix the finance system in this country.
We're not qualified for that.
And that is like a much bigger conversation. Yeah. It's a great point, is that men feel that in order to be successful, they need to be financially successful or financially secure. I think women feel the same thing. And I think women are experiencing the same thing, particularly women of the same demographic we're speaking about. So again, this is not an exclusive problem to men. Just want to point that out.
Yeah.
And it's not women's fault that you aren't being financially successful because women are in the same struggles. Women are still earning 80 cents on the dollar for every man. That stat was true in 2005. It is 20 years later. It is 2025. We are still at 80 cents on the dollar. That number has not budged in 20 years. And we've been pushing and trying to generate change, graduating more women, putting more women in college, putting more women in positions of power in companies to the extent that we can. And we're still here.
Actually, Jamie, recently there was just a study that came out that said in 2022, we were earning 84 cents to the dollar compared to men. And now today it's actually 81 cents. So for those who say, what do you have to complain about? It's 2025. Everything is equal. Women can achieve everything that men can achieve. There are institutional problems that inhibit us from doing so, which is, again, Jamie, to your point, that women are blaming the institutions and we are calling out the systems that are causing these problems and we are trying to do something about it. Meanwhile, men are, again, blaming women for a lot of these problems. And like, really quick, I just want to say, like, women have been forced to be so resilient and overcome these things. Not even just women. Like, let's think of like BIPOC populations, vulnerable populations have been forced to be so resilient in spaces that were not built for us. So now we're at a precipice where men who are not the ultra wealthy are feeling this pain.
To get us back into talking about men's emotional needs and the fact that they don't know how to deal with it.
They don't know how to emotionally regulate. They're not conditioned to emotionally regulate. They're conditioned to get angry. Get angry. That's the one emotion that the patriarchy says is perfectly fine.
Acceptable.
Yeah, that's the masculine emotion. They get one emotion. Bill Burr, the comedian, does this amazing special on, I think it's HBO, called The Drop Dead Years, about being over 50 and being a man. And he does this hysterical rant about how men are only allowed to feel anger. And like, people will ask them how they're doing. They'll be like, I'm fine. What do you mean? I'm fine. They get angry at you asking them how they're doing because they don't even know how to say, I'm fine. Everything's good. They don't know how to do that. They're socially conditioned to be masculine, and anger is the only emotion that they're given. And so of course they're depressed. The patriarchy is failing them too.
Well, as a mom of 2 boys, I am very intentional about allowing the boys to express their emotions, to, talk through their emotions, to say what they need. So Marco, the other day, he's my 4-year-old, he got very upset, and it was probably just because his shoes were on the wrong feet or something like that, typical thing. But he was like having a tantrum type episode. And, I just let him kind of process those feelings. And then he will come to me and say, I need a hug. So he'll like come to me and say that. And once he has a hug and is able to cry it out in my arms, then he's good. And I understand that you were sad. Let's talk about what we need to do to change it for the next time. I am their mom. I am with them 75% of the time. However, if they see their father not emulating those same emotional regulation behaviors, it's not going to matter as much when they get older, because boys need male role models in order to understand that they have permission to feel those feelings and that they have permission to be something that is different than what society has required.
That's what I was going to say, is that men give them the space and the permission to do that. Men who they are emulating or finding as role models. So I think that goes back to digging into, what do these men need? And I think a piece of it is they need permission from the men in the generations above them to act in certain ways, exist in certain ways, shift the culture in certain ways. And
feel their feelings.
Yeah, feel their feelings. I saw this a lot in corporate America from a women's perspective. So, my upcoming in corporate America was in this generation of women who started building women's networks and mentoring organizations and support groups for women in corporate to help bring women up in the next generation. And particularly as an elder millennial, we took on a lot to turn around and continue to reach back and to do better for the girls that were coming up behind us. And I have not seen any of that from the males' side at all. My husband is very supportive of women in the workplace. Cristina, I know your husband is very supportive of women in the workplace. I imagine all of our husbands are, because those are the men we have chosen. But have you seen your husbands be supportive of younger men in the workplace, advocating for younger men? And that was a big issue that I took when we rolled out family leave policies at different companies that I've been at. Is we couched it as family leave. That was very important. This was not maternity leave. This is family leave, men and women taking it equally. And from senior leaders who were men, it was acceptable for women to take leave. Naturally, they gave birth. It was not acceptable for the young men to take leave. It was joked about. I heard the jokes. I was in the room when they were happening. it was laughed at, and it was recognized as if you took that leave, it was acceptable for you to be fired because you weren't doing your job.
Men were punished for being more feminine, one might say.
Yeah, sure. You can frame it
I mean,
that way.
Punished for being feminine, like from the time that they're born in
Absolutely.
some way.
Right.
I mean, Cristina, you've talked about how sometimes the older generation will tell your boys not to cry. I mean, you don't say that to them, but you've heard other men say that to them, right?
Absolutely.
So this is the thing, is what they're learning is I can feel my feelings with my mommy. And then what you get is you get a bunch of mommy boys, which we've all dated in our 20s.
Wow.
Disaster,
Wow.
right? And they are expecting you to carry their emotional load just like their mommy did. But then when they get to the world, they must be stoic and only show one emotion, which is basically aggression of some sort.
Well, that's really interesting too, to think the change comes from male role models, and it also comes interpersonally, that they can turn to other boys who are their age to seek comfort and emotional regulation, the same way that we teach girls to seek female friendships and women for support and emotional regulation.
I don't think that's true once you hit puberty. I think once you hit puberty, you come into a new understanding of your gender, right? Gender learning, which we've talked about last season, starts really young, right? As young as 2. Expectations and gender identity shifts again when you hit puberty. That's when you start seeing mean girls in the playground. That's when boys start bullying each other. It's because they are asserting the gender norms that they have seen. So I don't think that, 15-year-old boys can go to their best friends for comfort. I think that that's...
I agree with you. I don't think they can. My point is, should we be advocating for that more? Is that what part of the answering of what we need is?
I think it's a little bit
peer-to-peer support, not just hierarchical support.
I think the problem with this is that it's a little bit of the dog chasing its tail, where it's like you don't know which comes first. Like what we're basically saying here is, well, it's really up to men to teach other men emotional fluidity. But men don't know emotional fluidity. So how are they supposed to teach other men emotional fluidity? Okay, we'll come in as women and we'll show them and tell them, oh, no, that's being feminine. They can't do that. Or they can do that with their women. And therefore, then they want women to be around them to carry the emotional load for them. And now we, as, liberated women, are going, no, we don't want to be your mommy. We want to be your partner. We want to be equal to you. And we want you to reciprocate the emotional load of the household. And they don't have those skills. They don't know how to do this. So the question to me comes to, like, how does it start? You can't tell somebody who doesn't know how to do something to teach it to somebody else.
Maybe it comes down to us helping our partners to realize that they don't have to only have anger as their emotion, that they can have more complicated emotions. Let's go into movies and film as an example. You always need a female character to show the emotion that the male characters are not going to show, because otherwise it just is flat, because the men don't have any emotion. And it pains me to say that we have to put more work on women to change the world. But you know what? If that's what works, then maybe that's what works. But it's encouraging our husbands to find ways that they can process their emotion in a way that feels safe. Tiffany, I know your husband has a special way.
Yeah, he does. He goes to the woods. He definitely... solitude hikes and his camping moments are very, very important to him. And I think that he processes a lot. He always comes back very grounded and very self-soothed. But I'm not sure that that's helping the next generation.
I think
that's
it helps.
him.
And here's why, because this is what's coming up. Men are looking outward to solve these problems. The men that are raising these issues are coming to this conversation and they're looking outward. And a big subset of this conversation is around blaming feminism and blaming women, because women's success does not support men. Okay. But here's what I think we're saying is we need to stop men need to stop looking outward, and they need to start looking inward first. And they need to really dig in to what they need and how they want to be supported. Because again, as women, we're here to help. I'm here to help. I want to support. I don't want to be blamed. It's not fair.
It feels a lot like parenting when a kid is having a temper tantrum and you're like, what do you need from me? And they're just screaming and crying and carrying on. And you're just like, you need to use your words to tell me how I can help you. I will help you, but I need to know what you need. Maybe we're in that point right now where the men are all having a temper tantrum and they don't know how to use their words. And it's not because they literally don't have them, like 2-year-olds.
I honestly feel like they've been conditioned to not use words. They've been conditioned to not talk about their emotions. Like, we talk a lot about social conditioning on this podcast, right? And we talk a lot about women's social conditioning and how we've been socially conditioned to be servants, essentially, and to always serve others, to always pick up the emotional load, to do all this invisible labor. So we have to give them the same credit that we give ourselves. They have been socially conditioned to suppress all of their emotions, to not use girly words like feelings, to not talk about this amongst each other, to handle everything on their own, to pick themselves up on the bootstraps, to place their own personal value on external success. So when you say things, they just need to like learn their words and we just need to talk to them like children. The reason why I push back on that is because we have to do the same thing for them that we're trying to do for ourselves. We cannot say, hey guys, don't talk to us like we're kids. This is social conditioning. We can't then turn around and do that to them. That's not fair.
Yeah.
We have to say they are also socially conditioned to
exist in a certain way.
To exist in a certain way that's not serving them anymore. Just like we were socially conditioned to exist in a certain way that's not serving us anymore. And so what did we do as feminists? We talked about it. We created a movement. We shifted. We changed. We have to encourage men to do the same. They need their own movement. They need their own new definition of masculinity.
That is happening right now. It's just being co-opted by extremists. And they are using this hyper-masculine language. And then also excusing a lot of bad behavior with the whole trope, boys will be boys.
That's literally, Jamie, go off.
I
Jamie,
can't.
Audience, get ready.
Yeah,
here we go.
It really just, the excuses that boys will be boys just guts me. Like, I can't explain how frustrating it is to hear somebody throw their hands up and just be like, well, that's just the way it is, because it's such garbage. I mean, it's just bullshit. Let's stop it now. We have the ability to stop it.
Men commit, 92% of the violence in the world? Okay. This is not helping anybody to just be like, yeah, boys will be boys. They'll punch each other in the face. They'll rape, they'll pillage, they'll be aggressive unnecessarily.
I mean, just yesterday, Marco comes home and he's like, yeah, another little boy pantsing himself in front of Marco. And it's just like, okay, well, what did the teachers do? Tiff, you know how we're all busy moms carrying a mental load that feels like 12 tabs open on Google? And then your kid does something so cute that you want to freeze it forever, not just as a photo, but actually capturing the moment.
I know exactly what you mean. And sometimes you want to capture more than just a photo. You want to capture what is truly happening in the moment and not forget the meaning behind the photo.
Well, now there's an app to do exactly that. Poppy is the beautifully designed photo app that lets you add voice notes to your photos so you can tell the story behind the smile in seconds.
Yep. Now you can capture the moments that matter effortlessly with Poppy, the voice note memory app for modern moms. Download on iOS or tap our show notes and use our promo code MOMMYHASPOPPY for 3 months free at checkout.
But I think it does get back to the point where it's like we're letting young men off the hook. And I go back to that whole thing. Women have been forced to be resilient in these spaces that were not built for them. Men have not been pushed to that pain point yet. And here we're at the pain point. And I want to clarify, we have said a lot of men. We are not referring to all men. No. We here are married to 4 wonderful men who are allies for women. However, many men are let off the hook in order to skate by with mediocrity. And that is seen in so many spaces right now, like how men are also falling behind in education and how that actually might be leading to a lot of these problems that we're seeing today.
So interestingly, with education, when modern education started in the Industrial Revolution, it was a way to educate the next generation of industrial workers, of machinists, and textile workers. And that was the implied reason for the formal education system as we know it. A lot of girls continued their educations longer than the boys because there weren't as many factory jobs for women as there were for boys. So the women weren't sent to work in the factories. They were being educated to be domestics or to work in shops and be front facing. They needed more skills. They needed more math. They needed more poise. They needed skills that were introduced later in school. So it sort of almost started there. And girls have outperformed boys in traditional school settings since traditional school settings have started. So it was a system that was sort of created for men by men, but girls have always done better.
And girl brains develop differently than boy brains, and young girls have skills that suit the current education system more so than boys. So, for example, young girls can organize better, they can listen better, they have better focus than boys at the same age. And so one of the things that they're putting out there is maybe boys need to start school a year later than girls.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I want to say is the whole problem with this entire conversation to me is that we're pitting boys against girls still. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's
so true.
Well, what makes boys different and what makes girls different? The truth is we're all human. We have to like stop talking in these binary positions. Even though we're trying to bridge a gap here, we're still comparing boys against girls, boys against
totally
girls.
Agree. And also when there's an improvement made, wouldn't it benefit all students? Like if there's something that needs to be done better for boys, wouldn't it also benefit girls? And so why wouldn't we do it for everybody at the end of the day?
If, for example, we really find that boys going to school a year later than girls helps put them on sort of an even playing field, then doesn't that mean boys will interrupt the class less and therefore everybody in the class benefits more? It's a ripple effect. Whatever we do for women affects men. Whatever we do for men affects women because we are all human beings in a shared world. Male suicide rates affect women, right? Women having heart attacks that are going undiagnosed because we don't study women's bodies affects men. Men are losing their mothers. They're losing their wives. This is all a problem with humanity. And I just want to figure out a way to stop comparing and despairing. It's not serving anybody. And then even, Jamie, when you talk about capitalism, and you talk about when the tide rises, it lifts all boats. That's only true when there's a healthy competition. And we're in this very unhealthy competition place right now in this society where, you know, girls are doing better than boys and that's not fair. And so we need to send them back to the kitchen. And like, you know, boys are they created this system. And if they're not doing what they need to do to support the system they created, well, then F them. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, it's so petty and stupid and it's hurting everybody.
Yeah. And it's exhausting and it's distracting from the real problem of fixing the systems that are no longer serving us because of everything that is happening in today's modern society. And you know what? The wealthy higher powers are winning right now because the rest of us are so distracted. However, we want to solve this problem and we need men to jump in order to be proactive about the problem because we also want to be proactive. So let's do it together. But we still need to answer the question, what do men need in order to do that? From the podcast episode that we just listened to, one of the things that was talked about was structure and the feeling also of being needed and belonging. And women, again, not to put men and women against each other, but there are biological differences here because women have this innate sense of structure and belonging actually due to our menstrual cycles because it's this biological right that leads us to the timeline of motherhood, and we're inherently able to see that trajectory where it's like, okay, you get your period and then you go through these things, and we're also growing through that pain that happens through our menstrual cycles, and men don't have that, and they seek out that pain in order to feel growth, and they need structure and discipline in order to get into that same place that we are already in. And as moms, like, when do you ever feel not needed? Like, have you ever felt not needed?
I ever not felt needed as a woman, as a girl.
Also, yeah.
Girl, I was like, you gotta buck up, Buttercup, because there's a whole family here that needs you. And I was like 5.
I mean, they would never say, whereas if you were a boy, perhaps they would have said, well, boys will be boys, so we can't ask that person for help.
I for sure feel in my family, and I'm not going to call any names out because I love every member of my family, but for sure, there is a double standard of what we expect of girls and what we expect of the boys. And every time there is a family gathering, the girls show up. They're usually answering for the boys. They're usually like, yeah, and my brother's going to come too, or, and I'm going to bring my boyfriend, whatever. And like everybody's on the group text, but it's usually the girls who respond. Not always, but usually. They're usually the ones who come with the food. They're usually the ones who stay after and help clean up. They're usually the ones figuring out how everybody's going to get home. And the boys just are along for the ride. I think that's true for a lot. I don't think that's just my family. I think that's true for a lot of families. I know it's also true for my husband's family to a certain extent.
Well, women are socialized to be the kin keepers, right? We're the ones who are supposed to make sure that the family stays together, that the group stays together, right? Part of our fight or flight response is to gather the community together to protect the children. I wonder if that's more of the social conditioning that we need for men is show up, take care of yourself, and take care of other people. There's more than one way.
I think that our social conditioning as being sort of the servant gives us an automatic purpose, doesn't it? Whereas I think a lot of these young boys that we're talking about that feel so left behind are looking for purpose, and they don't have people relying on them in the same way
anymore today.
Yeah. And I also think that because we are the gender that has been oppressed, like since the dawn of time, we always have had to look inward, right? We've always had to go inside of ourselves and be like, okay, who am I? What do I really want? How can I break through these barriers? Whereas boys and men, again, always conditioned to be like, you're the provider. You have to make sure that you have success. You have to make sure that you're making money. Your job is to go out into the world and like define yourself by how the world sees you. We weren't seen, right? We were like stuck in the kitchen. So we were sort of forced to go more internal, I think.
Well, so the point is we're like dancing around this big piece of the puzzle. And I think the nail in it is that we as humans need to feel needed. And women do not have a hard time securing or seeking or finding that because it feels like we are always needed in some way, shape, or form. And we also can get self-worth and satisfaction by going inward, to your point, Tiffany, around what we're doing. But men seek that satisfaction or that support from external sources and reinforcement that comes from outside. And because men are not, quote, feeling needed right now because women can go to college and they can make their own money and they can find success without the support of men, they are lost. And my counter to that is we are here and have been here as moms and as women telling men what they are needed for over and over again. And so if you are seeking to be needed in this world and you're a man, pick your head up and look around. There are people everywhere that could need your support and could benefit from your privilege and your time and what you can give, whether that's in your immediate family or that's in your extended family or that's in your community or your school or your work. There are places everywhere where you can serve others and you will feel good about that service. Step up, step up.
So many men in this age range of this generation that we're talking about that are addicted to their phones and to
taking themselves out of this conversation, taking themselves out of society and
what
retreating.
What happens with video games is that you get instant gratification, right? You get that dopamine hit and you can be very successful at a video game and have an entire community of men that are going, yeah, you're awesome, da, 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 and feed you that feeling of you're successful, but you haven't left your mother's garage.
Well, and you don't get anything for that success. There's no, like, you succeed in a video game and what? Okay, you've won the video game. Now what?
Well, you have to go back to the video game to feel it. That's the thing.
It goes back, though, to letting boys off the hook.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is we talked about this in another episode, right? Where we were like, is social media actually good for you? Right? Where we were like, is it okay to detach? And is going onto social media as a way of detaching from the real world actually helping you? And I think the answer we came to was no. So it sort of holds that video games as a way to detach and get that virtual feeling of success and dopamine is also not helping you because it doesn't exist in the real world. And you need to put it down and go out and find that emotion. somewhere else in real life. I really like, Cristina, when you said that boys don't have the same cyclical sort of pain as women do, right? They say that period cramps are the same sort of pain level as a heart attack, which is one of the reasons why women don't know when they're having heart attacks.
Fascinating.
And then I'm thinking a lot right now about hot sauce and peppers in food and spicy food. And like, I need a hit of pain so that I can feel something.
There's a very fine line between pain and pleasure. That's for sure. I mean, just look at sex, right? I mean, there's
sex and childbirth.
And yeah, so men are looking to feel something. But again, Jamie, you just said we literally are giving the list. We have provided all of the things that we need. The problem is they're not listening to us. And that is why I go back to the permission and the validation needs to come from other men. And if other men are not pushing that, then what happens? These young men are going to go to the echo chamber that exists in their earpieces and say, hey, this podcast bro named Andrew Tate is telling me that I am good enough. I am a manly man. Like, all I need to do is tell women that I am the boss and I am dominating them. And then what happens? They're stuck in this echo chamber, and that further fuels the battle between the genders.
Who wants to date a guy who's saying, I am better than you and I am here to dominate you and you better do what I say? I don't want to date that guy.
No, I want to punch that guy.
Exactly.
But then that guy will go back. And guess what? What happened a couple weeks ago that not enough people are talking about? An Andrew Tate fanboy went and murdered 2 young women. He mowed them down in his vehicle. He was stalking one of them and she would not reciprocate his advances. Because again, Andrew Tate told them they are not worthy humans. They are not valuable as you are. And so he listened to all this stuff and he was validated within this social construct that was built by these men that are red pilling other men and building that structure. There is a reason why so many young men are turning to religion. And I am very Catholic. However, when you are using religion in order to justify misogyny, oppression, violence, that is not what Jesus was about. That is not what religion is about. Well, Jesus for me, just different for you.
This entire crisis that we're talking about for men right now is completely being weaponized. It's being weaponized by the right. It's being weaponized by the bros. It's being weaponized by the wealthy. It's being weaponized by religion, or they're weaponizing religion to justify it, however you want to look at it or say it. And I think it's a really, really big problem. And I think that the sad thing is ladies, I don't think that women can solve this problem.
No, we can't. I fully agree with that.
I have another idea, which is that in masculine spaces, feminine concepts are supported. So in your companies, making sure that men tell men to take parental leave. I'm thinking about Melinda French Gates way back in the day, letting one of the people who worked under her take more time so that he could also be around family that needed his help. She was a woman and she made a way for his work to allow him to be with his family, that allows him to be a kin keeper without compromising his ability to be a successful man in a traditional successful man role. So I do think that, you know, as much progress as women have made in the working world, the more that we can support emotions and men taking parental leave or showing up for their families within those spaces, I think that is a really good way of giving men what they need, because they need to know it's okay, and they need to know it's okay from other men, and the other men who they look at and who they aspire to be are their bosses once they get into the workforce, right? Which is that 18 to 34.
Well, and emotional intelligence has been proven to be one of the most important parts of leadership. And I'm fascinated by that study. You know, there's that guy that wrote that EQ book, and I forget what his name is now, but he's a famous author. And I've seen him on a lot of podcasts and so forth talking about emotional intelligence. And he's done all of this research that says the best CEOs are the people who understand human emotion. And I feel like we need to get men caught up to that somehow, like to understand that you want to be the typical traditional masculine man who is a good leader. Like the Bible says, be a leader of your family, whatever doctrine that you want to hold on to that helps you define yourself as a leader. Emotional intelligence is a huge part of that.
Yeah.
And we all know that, right? We've all had the bosses that have no emotional intelligence and everybody hates them and nobody wants to stay in that job and they can't get loyalty from people, right? And then you have the boss who really listens to you and really hears you out and really takes your best interest to heart. You would work for them forever. And if they tell you, I can't afford to give you that promotion, but I really want to, but you just keep working. And, as soon as I have some extra money, we're going to get you a bonus. You'll stay for another year, right? The way that you are treated at work has a huge part of whether or not you're going to want to stay in that job.
It starts from the top down.
How do we as women at the bottom tell the top what to do? Because we've been trying that and that has not been working.
Well, I think it comes down to support and encouragement because there are men out there who are carrying the flag and who are raising the conversation. I mean, Scott Galloway, Jonathan Haidt, Richard Reeves,
Joe Hudson's doing a lot of really great work on
Hudson,
teaching men how to be emotional.
There's plenty more out there that we're not going to be able to all name. So I think the point is, let's continue to support those men. Let's continue to put energy behind those men. Let's continue to raise the conversations that they're raising and pushing and continue to say what we need to say and support what we're doing. And, we can swim into parallel lanes on this. And again, because we're doing something for men doesn't mean we're going to take away from what we are doing to support and do for women.
Changing the world to make it better and more inclusive of everybody for everybody's benefit is a multi-pronged effort.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There isn't one solution. And I also think this gets to something we were talking about, Cristina. You said that how do we teach boys that their privilege is a responsibility? And I think that's what we're getting to here, that you have been giving a privilege as a man. And that privilege of being an implied leader and an implied authority also means you have to teach people how to be better.
Yeah. Okay, but here's the problem. I don't want to say a lot of men do not think that being a man is a privilege.
Right.
There's a huge pushback against the word privilege. There's a huge pushback up against the concept of privilege. And a lot of them are saying we're actually the ones who are oppressed, which I know makes me laugh a little bit on the inside because it's so insane and ridiculous. However, that is their perspective. So you have to meet people where they're at. And you can't say okay, you need to understand your privilege when they're like, yeah, take your privilege and shove it up your ass. You know what I mean? Like, that's not going to work. So I think, again, it's like we almost have to start with, where do we start?
I mean,
I'm not sure, but
Tiffany,
that's what I have to say about the word privilege.
But what I mean by that is not that we're talking to the 18 to 34-year-olds about their privilege as a responsibility. I'm talking to the 45 to 60-year-olds about their privilege being a responsibility, and talking to 7-year-olds and about how their privilege is a responsibility.
Yeah.
So you're right. This isn't an answer directly to the demographic that we are specifically talking about here, but it is something to include in the messaging moving forward.
Yeah. I also think that when it comes to, how do we get men to start taking some responsibility in helping these younger men, starting with our own internal family units is a really great way. Like, I'm just thinking our workplaces, when we have those male allies, like Cristina, you were talking about your little boy feeling his feelings in your arms, right? Can you go to Jake and say, listen, I need you to hold Marco the next time that he cries. I need you to show some emotion when you're feeling that. I need you to talk about emotions to your sons. Can't just come from me. They're not looking to you, Cristina, to see how to be a man. They're looking to him to see how to be a man. They're looking to you to be a mommy. But at some point, they're going to have to be adult men, and they're going to get that from your husband.
Women cannot fix men, but we still can raise boys who don't need fixing.
And we can support. We can provide support. We can provide resources. We can provide empathy. We're here for that. We're here for all of that.
And we can speak to our male partners or our male allies and ask them to step up and help the younger generation feel feelings.
But they got to go inward. They got to work on this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the last thing I do want to point out is critical thinking. In order for boys to become men who can have independent thoughts and not rely on outward validation, they need to be raised to become critical thinkers. So we have lots of work to do, but male allies, please step up because
Yeah.
we need you to become the male role models that our boys and our young men desperately need. Please, men out there, we recognize ones who are doing the great work. There are so many amazing men, and we will highlight some of them in the show notes. So shout out to those. But we as women need so many more to step up and reach back to those younger generations because they need help. So with all that said, thank you, ladies.
And continuing the conversation is part of the solution.
Thanks, Cristina.
Thanks.
Bye.
Mommy Has Questions is brought to you by, among other things, a vibrant moms collective that provides in-person programming and online content. For more information, please visit momsamongotherthings.com. This episode was produced by Cristina Sansone and directed by Tiffany Hodges, with theme music by Juan Carlos Enriquez. Hit subscribe to catch our next episode and rate and review us to let others join our village.